You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey, welcome back to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And this week we are discussing our February 2025 book club pick, The Verifiers by Jane Peck, a murder mystery about an online dating investigator who gets pulled into a murder mystery. Rira. You know, it kind of felt like February went pretty fast given the January that we had, but at the same time, this year has been 5 years already. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Yeah, it really does feel like it's been the longest month ever. And February has, it's the shortest month of the year. So I'm not like too surprised that it went by quickly. But also, so much happened. And I really wish I didn't wake up every day dreading what else has gone wrong in our country.
You had your wedding reception. I'm raising my children. I feel like I've become like a troll somehow. Like I have become the type of person who just dives headlong into smelling my children's butts for poo. I literally have dried spit up on my arm right now. And yeah.
Welcome to parenthood.
I've become a monster. But my children are gremlins. We're a family of monsters. It's okay.
That's your life for the next 2-3 years.
Yeah.
But your gremlins will learn how to communicate their needs a little bit more articulately.
Don't feed them after dark and don't get them wet because then we'll have problems. I'm sure we'll talk more about this in this month's Boba Chat, which is our patrons exclusive podcast, which you can gain access to if you join our Books and Boba Patreon. This podcast, of course, is supported in part by our listeners through patreon.com/booksandboba. So if you enjoy what we're doing here and would like to support, as well as gain access to our members-only Discord server, head on over. We really appreciate your support. Let's just get into it. A quick standard spoiler warning. Our book club discussions go into the entire plot of our book club pick. If you don't want to be spoiled, and this, of course, is a murder mystery, so spoilers is an important part. This is your cue to hit pause, finish the book, and then come back and join us after you've done. But yeah, let's get started. Rira, can you start us off with the book jacket description of The Verifiers?
Claudia is used to disregarding her fractious family's model minority expectations. She has no interest in finding either a conventional career or a nice Chinese boy. She's also used to keeping secrets from them, such as that she prefers girls and that she's just been stealth recruited by Veracity, a referrals-only online dating detective agency. A lifelong mystery reader who wrote her senior thesis on Jane Austen, Claudia believes she's landed her ideal job. But when a client vanishes, Claudia breaks protocol to investigate and uncovers a maelstrom of personal and corporate deceit. So The Verifiers is the first book in what seems to be a duology. It might be more of a series. The Rivals, the sequel, is already out now. It came out in December.
Yeah. We're hoping to get Jane Peck on the podcast for an author chat sometime soon. It's been in the works, but
life happened.
The very chaotic winter happens. Hopefully we'll get her on sooner rather than later. But really excited to get into the second book as well, because I really enjoyed this novel. As someone who did meet his now wife and mother of his children through online dating, it was really cool to see it reminds me of, you know how there's certain films that focus on a specific topic, right? But they build a movie around it, like Dodgeball. They want to talk about Dodgeball, so they build a sports movie around it. A lot of rom-coms do this, right? Like, there's a rom-com about someone who really likes food. So let's make them a food journalist and talk about the world of chefing. This is like Jane obviously has a big interest in either online dating or big tech or both. But she somehow said, you know what? I'm going to create a murder mystery out of these themes. And I think it really worked.
Yeah, I know that some people were confused by how the book was marketed. So it is murder mystery, but it kind of leans more towards cozy mystery because it is like more humorous. And I feel like it has more of a slice of life aspect to it that like some murder mysteries don't. Like they're like more straightforward, like very heavily plot driven. But I think this book really dove into Claudia's family dynamics and dating culture. It was not the typical murder mystery that some people might be into, but I thought it really worked.
Yeah, she plays a lot with genre conventions too, because Claudia herself, the character, is an English major. So she makes a lot of references to classic detective fiction, both Chinese and Western, as well as Jane Austen. It was really fun. And I think another hallmark of like the cozy mystery is like your, I guess, like every man or every woman type of investigator who like is not like a professional investigator, even though in this book she kind of is professionally an investigator. Yeah. And the fact that like they're good, but they're not smart. She makes a lot of very questionable decisions in the story as an investigator. And I think that's part of the cozy mystery vibes as well. We spend a lot of time with her family and get into her family dynamics, which is like what a toxic family she has, right?
I think it's fairly normal, like par for the course for an immigrant family. I come from a dysfunctional family as well. So I was like, oh, this is normal. I actually had to look up if Inspector Yuan is an actual detective series in real life because she references Jane Austen and other literary works. And like Bronte, for example, I'm like, is Inspector Yuan real? And it's not. She made him up completely. It was so funny because she refers to Inspector Yuan in all these cases, like what he would do in these specific cases. Like, oh yeah, there was this one book/episode where he had like a locked room mystery and it turns out the culprit did blah, 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 blah. Very, very specific references where I'm like, I feel like I've read this case before. I feel like I've seen this in Sherlock Holmes or watched it in an episode of some procedural show. She definitely nailed a lot of the detective tropes.
Yeah, it really reminded me of, I wasn't sure if Inspector Young was an actual detective series, but there is a tradition of imperial magistrate detective stories. One that comes to mind is Bao Qingtian, which is a story about a judge in, I forget which dynasty, China. There's a long-running C-drama I remember watching when I was a kid, where you have 5-episode arcs of a murder mystery, and his investigators go out and try to solve it. And at the end of every arc, it ends with him like ordering the execution of the actual murderer.
Yeah, we read a book called The Inugami Curse, and it features Kosuke Kindaichi, who's like the Sherlock Holmes of Japan, and he's very eccentric and kind of reminded me of Inspector Yuan. So yeah, there was a lot of like references for avid mystery readers mixed in with real references like Miss Marple and Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I did love that she essentially, this story is about an English major doing good by her major, right? Because she's able to use her encyclopedic knowledge of literature to help her solve the mystery, right?
I wrote in my notes during I had a migraine while I was reading this book, like fantastic. But my hazy note says, English major being useful for STEM. People always joke about, what are you going to do with your English major or a liberal arts degree? It's actually very useful, okay? Media literacy and understanding data, that is very much a skill that you learn in English classes.
That reminds me of a scene, I think it's in the middle of the book, where she's at her friend's either art gallery or party, and she's talking to, was he a screenwriter or another writer? And she's passing off details of her case, but through like, I'm writing this story. Can you tell me if these characters make sense? And like, oh, using workshopping to help whiteboard this case.
Yeah, it's very like her being like, hey, you work in a lab. If I was taking this specific migraine medication, what would cause me to overdose with only 2 extra doses? What else should be mixed in there? Very specific questions, but also in a lot of detective fiction where you have amateur sleuths, they happen to have a friend who work in the field that they need more information from. And we see that with her brother as well, her brother Charles, who works for Precision, which is a consulting firm that primarily works with this very big matching agency. And she's like, oh, tell me more about what's been happening at work. Like anything strange lately? And I'm just like, wow, very amateur sleuth.
So in a way, she's also pretty good at sleuthing, which is actually a problem for her because it's not part of her job, right? Her job is verifying whether or not people's dating profiles are accurate. But she just really wants to be a detective, right? Because the story starts with her working this case of this woman who wants them to look into like a guy who's just not what he seems. The client eventually gets murdered, or the client dies, but Claudia realizes that things don't add up. This is definitely murder, and I definitely need to solve this case as an investigator.
Yeah. But even before that, Claudia goes above and beyond even before she finds out about the murder of her client, because one of the cases that she gets from the client is, oh, yeah, I think this guy is seeing someone else because he just kind of ghosted me and I want to know what's happening. She goes on her standard observation procedure where she has Finders Keepers, an app that you put in someone's phone number and you can like find their GPS location, and she like goes in person to take pictures to see if they are seeing someone. But she took a very bad picture. She's like, okay, I need to find extra proof. So she goes to every single dry cleaner in the radius of like, I don't know, 5 blocks, and she just pretends to be an assistant, being like, hey, my boss asked me to pick up their dry cleaning, do you have it ready? Maybe his wife dropped it off. And I'm like, that is above and beyond.
It's also fraud, right? She's like breaking a lot of, like, she does not play by, like, definitely not like a legal thing to do. I think that's why.
Is it fraud though? Like,
I'm pretty sure you're misrepresenting yourself to get someone else's private information. Pretty sure it's a crime. Not that it's a crime for big corporations, but for the little guy, like, I feel like that's why her bosses are very like, that's not cool, because we don't want to get shut down for this.
Yeah, her company Veracity, they are very much like, yeah, we only look into the exact case and then we just freaking forget about it afterwards. We do not look into the why, we do not look into the motives. We just see if they're cheating or if they're representing themselves.
Yeah, well, because her company, they want to remain anonymous, right? They want to remain hidden, like a footnote in the agreement contracts that you sign. It's really interesting that you talk about Finders Keepers, which is the app they use to track their clients' targets. I'm pretty sure all of us who've ever like agreed to like sharing locations on like Uber Eats or any of these other apps, they're on these databases. These are the databases that when she asked whether it was legal that they have this data, it's like, well, it's legal as long as the person consents. But they may not have consented directly to Finders Keepers. They may have consented to the dating app, which then allows the dating app to do whatever they want with your data, including sell it to third parties, which is what happens here. Which it's like all the things you don't want to think about when you agree to these data sharing agreements. But like, at this point, our data is out there. If you've been using a smartphone, your data is compromised.
Or not even your smartphone. If you've been on the internet and used anything, like if you ordered something off the internet, your data is out there. It's unfortunately the world that we live in. But I think data mining from dating apps specifically is much more insidious than data mining from someone's mobile game or finding out where they shop, because it's so personal. You're putting out very vulnerable details about yourself, or details that you would like for yourself to have as personal traits out there in the world to find the love of your life. And this company has it. It's unsettling.
And it can be used to serve you as to buy other things or to push you towards certain, like, alt-right pipelines, for instance, or red pill pipelines. I think that's kind of the dark underside of big tech and data that this book wants to explore, which is you can have the best of intentions and apps may seem innocuous, but there are people willing to pay a lot of money to utilize that data for nefarious purposes. And in this case, willing to kill for it, right? I'm curious what you thought about this deep dive into online dating, because I know that you met your husband in person, like normal people back in like the early aughts. Whereas, I met my wife through an online app. We met through Coffee Meets Bagel, but this was also like 8 years ago when things were a little more, like, it was probably still insidious, but a little more of an age of innocence, right? I've been like somehow I ended up on like dating TikTok, and like online dating profiles have become the new social media profile. It's all about curating your perfect profile if you want to catch your like high net worth partner or a specific type of person that you're looking for. It's become gamified much like anything else on the internet. I'm so glad I didn't participate in the current present day version of online dating because I would have bounced off so hard.
Yeah, it has been really gamified. And also, I feel like dating profiles has become like Instagram profiles. Like you try to be as perfect and glossy as possible. Like add like not just filters to your profile picture, but also like filters on like your finances and also like your career and like your tastes in media. And I think also like a lot of people who are on online dating, it's not so much that they're looking for romantic relationships. Some people want hookups, some people want situationships where it's like, oh, I want to be in a relationship, but not have all the responsibility of taking care of my partner. And yeah, it's just become very casual because a lot of people think that because there are all these users on these apps, are like, well, if I don't find someone who matches my standards exactly, there's somebody else out there. Or if they find someone they like, they'll be like, well, what if like there's a better option out there? Like I need to keep my options open so they don't settle for like a commitment. So I think that's part of it, like dating culture and also just
but I feel
the
like
way.
But I feel like that's been
dating.
the case even in person dating, right? Like you're dating someone in college, you're like, well, do I want to commit, right? Or do I want to wait till we're adults? And like,
yeah, but in your mind, you don't have all these choices in your head. Like the person that you like, they're like, oh, there might be someone better out there. You don't have their profile.
yeah.
Where now it's like this person that I saw while I was swiping through. Yeah, like he might be my next husband or whatever.
I think it also depends on your mindset too, right? Like, are you approaching dating or online dating as a marriage market type of thing where you're trying to improve your lot in life? Are you like doing the Regency thing where you're trying to increase your personal wealth or status through marriage? And I think, the different apps have kind of stratified themselves into like, okay, here's the app for hookups. Here's the app for if you want something more serious. And, people self-select into those, right? Like, at least 8 years ago when I met my wife, on Coffee Meets Bagel was the app you use when you're a little bit more serious about looking for something more long-term, or at least that was the vibes. Or you still get people catfishing and defrauding people, but in general, the people you match with are also looking for something a little more serious. And I think that's what gave me the confidence to meet in person for coffee or something.
I do think it's funny that Jane Austen is brought up a lot in this book because in her books and during her time during the Regency era, like marriage was a very practical thing, right? Love was not in the equation. But now people want true love, but they use like the efficiency of online dating apps. So it's just like, yeah, it is very Regency in a way because you're trying to be as efficient as possible to find the best match. And I'm like, if Jane Austen was alive today, she would definitely be like, yeah, like I'm going to use dating apps in my book because that is the best way to find a man of fortune or whatever.
And it's really interesting because you have these dating apps, these matchmaking services that are using your data to match you with the best possible qualitative or quantitative match based on your data. Juxtaposed with when she's interacting with her mom and her mom's talking about, oh, I went to the matchmaker. Or, here's someone who will be compatible with your situation, right? And it's like, it says we're doing the same thing. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you are a child of Asian immigrants, your parents have tried to hook you up with someone before, being like, oh, this person went to this college and they have this career, they make this much money, and they're very nice and relatively good looking. You should go have a date with them, or they trick you into a date. For me, I'm like, my parents don't know me that well, so I would not trust them to pick a partner I would spend the rest of my life with. But there are some parents out there who know their kids pretty well.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like a toss-up, really. It could be a good match, but also you're not the one who put in the data yourself. You're relying on a human being with their own biases and stuff. So
yeah,
really, yeah.
And with Claudia's mom, it's more like she is essentially projecting, right? Like, oh, here's someone who will be financially stable, who will stay with you. That's all that really matters because, her own family, her dad skipped out, right, after racking up. Was it gambling debt or something?
Gambling debt.
Yeah. And it's like her mom is trying. She reminds me of other immigrant parents. They're mean, but only because they're frustrated. And it's not until I became a parent that I understood how that feels. there's no outlet sometimes for frustration when you're a parent. But then some people can't handle that, right? And they lash out, and that becomes generational trauma, right? And
I mean, like Claudia at one point says early in the book, she's like, "Oh, if my mom could go back in time to when she was 26 years old and about to immigrate to New York from Taiwan, she would make a run for it. There's no way she would choose to have 3 kids or marry this man." I feel like that is the case for a lot of, not even just like Asian immigrant parents, but just like parents of the boomer generation, because marriage was seen as a checklist. It's like, oh, you're an adult now. You need to get married, have children, have property. And it's like, that's not really the key to happiness, but it's what's expected.
It's kind of what they're taught too, right? Because they do make mention that it's what Confucius said used to do, right?
Man, fuck Confucianism. I hate it so much.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So speaking of Claudia's family, Claudia's position in that family, right? Because I feel like we've read a lot of, Asian American child of immigrants fiction where we follow the oldest child and the burdens that are put on them. I don't remember the last time we read one. I may not just remember, or it may not have been a big plot point, but I remember the last time reading the experience of the youngest child, right? The favorite child, right? Like Claudia is someone who obviously, because she stayed the longest with her mother, was like the youngest child. So the one that her mom focused a lot of her energy on at the expense of her older siblings who were sent back to Taiwan to be raised, because that's what you did back then when your parents were like underwater, was you send your kids to live with their grandparents while they get things under control. I think, I was sent to Taiwan for a year while my parents were getting settled in Los Angeles as well. So I'm familiar with that experience. I didn't realize that was what was happening until recently, like reading these immigrant fiction books. But, we're reading the perspective of someone who is kind of oblivious of her own privilege and of her own role in the family, and why her older siblings kind of resent her for it. But
I actually don't think she's oblivious. I think she is very well aware of her role in the family and the favoritism. And she kind of tries to off-put it by being silly, being the one who cracks jokes at family dinners, and try to change the conversation from something heavy and about to implode into something just, innocuous. I think she knows her siblings have this resentment, but also she knows that her siblings love her. It is a very relatable relationship wherein you have a sibling who is the favorite and other dynamics like generational trauma and financial burdens. And it's the resentment and love goes hand in hand. And Charles is the oldest sibling. He's the model minority guy. He went to Harvard. He's responsible. He is the one who's taking care of the family, reliable, all of that. He was the one who took care of Claudia, took her to museums and getting ice creams. He was kind of like a second parent to her. He's always been that sibling she could count on. But at the end of the book, she's like, maybe he was doing that not just because he loves me, but because he needed that coping mechanism to survive the kind of neglect that his mom inflicted on him. And there's a line where Charles says he's always wanted to be an asset rather than a liability.
Yeah. I think it was sad because you see how not just Charles, but every single member of the family views their relationship with their mother as transactional, right? They have to be a certain way. They have to do certain things to earn her love, to earn her praise. She's very withholding about that. That's doubly true for her older siblings who didn't even see their mother until they were children, fully formed people.
There's a quote about Charles that really stuck out to me as the oldest child and only daughter and the reliable sibling. It's, "You become something if you act that way for long enough. Maybe that's the truth of why my brother loves me, and it might have made him a better version of the person he would have been otherwise. But the fact that he felt that he had no choice but to be that way, it hollows everything out."
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because Claudia and Charles have a moment that in a lot of Asian American literature is reserved for the parent, right? Having the heart-to-heart where you realize things weren't exactly what you remember. And there's a lot of things under the surface that you didn't know what was going on. Only in this case, it was with her brother, and how he took a gap year to work to support the family, and how he felt obligated to take care of her at the beginning, and how that kind of recolors their relationship. Really interesting how Jane plays with genre in like both Asian American fiction and in mystery fiction as well.
Yeah. And just so listeners know, the author, Jane Peck, is a first-gen immigrant. She lived in Singapore. To have a character who is essentially second-gen and the siblings are 1.5-gen, yeah, it's like, it's writing outside of your experience. So, but she like captured it really well. I would like to applaud her for that as someone who did not grow up here.
Yeah.
So I want to get I want to get back to the mystery aspect of it, because we did kind of like segued into like family drama and relationships, which were like my favorite parts of the book, strangely enough. But like I have to say, like when I found out what Veracity was, like, oh, this is a secret boutique agency that verifies your partner on dating apps to make sure they are who they seem to be, or, you know, make sure that they're not catfishing you / cheating on their like wife or husband or whatever. And I'm just like, you pay a lot of money to this boutique agency that is only like by referral. And I'm just like, I feel like everybody has that one nosy friend who would do all the work for free. And I wonder how viable of a business Veracity would be.
Also, they're just a rebranded, like, white labeled PI agency, right? They're essentially doing PI work under the wrapping of, oh, we're a high-end boutique service for high-wealth individuals in the dating space. And it's also such a tech move to rebrand something mundane and boring to something that's shiny and charging a lot of money for it.
Yeah. I mean, as that friend who has done background checks for their friends' dates and also tagged along and kind of been in the background to make sure they're not with a crazy person on dates, I'm just like, I am that friend. I have gone on deep dives and investigations.
Maybe you should start a boutique investigative agency.
I don't want to. That sounds like way too much work. I love the way that Claudia gets recruited at Veracity, because she was working at her brother's subsidiary firm and she was like a cog in the machine. Her friends were playing this murder mystery game on a mobile app, and they're like, hey, this is what it feels like to be inside your head. And, you know, this is really hard. And she's like, I'm pretty sure I can beat this game without that much effort. And she does. And she gets recruited by a very stealthy email.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, how would you like a job being a snooper? And it's like, I mean, wow, I feel like it's my ideal job.
I feel like this is the ideal application of like gamification, using games as test of aptitude, right?
I would love to get a job by just playing a game. I would get hired so fast.
You know, the only company I know that's doing that in earnest is the U.S. Army, right? There's this first-person shooter that is also a front for a recruitment campaign. I don't know if they're still doing that, but they were doing that for a long time in like the aughts.
Have you watched The Imitation Game, the movie?
I think I did.
It's about World War II, ciphers, the code breakers, and they recruit the code breakers by using a crossword puzzle. And I was like, yeah, we need to make job applications fun again.
Yeah. I think it speaks to Kamala, who's the founder of Veracity, his belief in the ability of tech and data to surface the best ideal outcomes, right? Because in any other company, it's more about who you know than what you can do. So I think it is in line with Kamala's character to recruit someone through like this test of aptitude, or this test of these certain skills that he wants from an investigator. Literally, no, he's also bringing out someone who's very obsessed.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't say it in the book, but I was like, Claudia, you're giving me autistic vibes, hyperfixation vibes.
Well, she loves a good narrative, right? Like, she's into
like, she just can't let it go.
Yeah. Like,
she's like, once she has a whiff of a mystery, or she has curiosity that just makes her make these very questionable decisions on her personal safety, and also like law breaking because she's like, I just have to know. And I'm like, that
Yeah.
is very dangerous for a detective agency that's trying to cover their ass and make sure that they're doing things by the book, which is weird because you are not a by the book company.
I mean, not a by the book company, but there are some by the book people in the company.
Yeah,
of
that's
which
true.
Is
Yeah.
Bex, her co-worker. She's not a co-founder, right? She's like the manager.
I would say she's the senior investigator, not
Yeah.
the owner, but she's definitely the second in command.
Who, like, this is how you, like, you know, Claudia. I don't know if I'm using this trope right because I'm not, like, but she's kind of a disaster lesbian, right? Like, she's kind of like every single interaction between Claudia and Bex is laced with sexual tension too, because he's always remarking how good she looks and how, like, she's so hot.
I didn't really read that as sexual tension. I thought it was just like very matter of fact, like, wow, Bex is super hot and intimidating, and it really works for her.
But the fact
I didn't
that she
really
notices that, the
read
fact
that
that
as-
it's part of her thought process is like,
I don't know. I notice really hot people, but I'm not attracted to them. I know the book jacket says Claudia is a lesbian, and she does have a hookup with another girl at a Halloween party. But for a long time, I thought she was aromantic, like someone who had sex, but she was just like not into the ideas of falling in love. And I was like, well, wouldn't that be really funny for someone who works at a dating detective agency and just, you know, trying to analyze people's reasons for dating people? I thought that would have been a really cool way to juxtapose her disinterest in love and dating, but she's a lesbian and she does have interests. I wonder if the sequel, The Rivals, has her getting more into romance with the possibility with Bex or somebody else.
yeah, I'm reading the book jack description right now, and it looks like there's going to be a love triangle between Bex and a client. So I think they're building on that. So I was correct. There is some building romance there. This is what you've done to me, Books and Boba. You
Readers, tell us if you read sexual tension or if you were like me, were like, no, like she's just
maybe not sexual
saying the matter of fact of like
tension.
it's like she's hot, she's capable, she's, you know, she's really intimidating, she's great.
Maybe not sexual tension, but she was definitely like a little horny for her. I feel like.
I beg to differ, but you know, I'm pretty sure that's what Jane intended, and I just ran away with my own interpretations of her character. But moving on, so like when their client passes away, their client was supposed to have a final meetup about their case. She had two cases open. One was with an actual person she, you know, met up with. And the other was just this guy who she talked with, but kind of ghosted her, never met in person. So there's like these like two mysterious cases attached to her. And then she mysteriously dies, or it looks like a suicide. Obviously, alarm bells are going off in Claudia's brain because she's like,
Yeah.
that's weird. That's sus.
Claudia, I feel like she immediately goes, I wonder if this is murder.
I mean, I would think it was murder, but I'm very much like Claudia's. I've consumed enough murder mysteries and watched enough true crimes to know.
Yeah.
What was interesting is that the client turns out to have been impersonating her twin sister. I thought that was like, oh, this is a trope that I've seen in a lot of detective stories, like Knives Out, for example.
Yeah, definitely a tried and true staple of the mystery genre. I really did enjoy the initial investigation of Claudia into the I think it was Charitaire,
The cheater?
right? We eventually find out it's a AI bot, the person
okay.
who ghosted or was kind of being weird with her in chat, and I think Jane.
I like
really,
that we saw the chat. Like we actually saw the dialogue that
Jane does a lot of really
dialogue
cool
that
things
Sarah-
with the format of her text, right? And so sometimes some parts of it kind of feels like it's like a notepad, like someone's like, you know, detective journal, and some parts you have like, you know, in this case we have the chat log with like Claudia's own footnotes, like commentary throughout, and I thought that was really fun to read.
Yeah, but like before, like she went in to investigate what was his name? Charera? Like the AI bot.
Chariter, yeah.
Chater. Yeah. She investigates Captain Bubbles, who turns out to be Jude Common, the guy cheating on his wife. I love how she thinks he's the one who killed Sarah, or, you know, Iris. Like she went by Iris, her sister's identity, and her real name is Sarah. And she like follows this lead as if she is like a dog who is just chasing after a boat. She's just like, this is it. I have to, like, it's like super sus. And
which, as someone who's as genre savvy as she is, I feel like she should have seen this as a red herring from a mile away, right?
I mean, but she does, though. She mentions it like after she has a confrontation with Jude, and like, you know, she finds out that, oh, he didn't see her that night that she died. She's like, damn it, like, I should have known better, because in Inspector Yawn novels, the first third of the book is always a red herring. Like, like, I can't believe I fell for it. And I'm just like, I love how Jane was poking fun at the structure of mystery novels, but also made that the structure of her mystery novel, because there's multiple red herrings.
Yeah, she does a lot of like lampshade hanging, right? Like, because she does mention that, that Claudia hates it when the third act reveals it was a corporation all along. In this book,
and it was a corporation all
along. Yeah, because she eventually finds out that Sarah Reeves, who was impersonating her sister, was a washed out journalism student working on a big story on matchmaking services, and specifically like the bots that they use to extract information from their users, and was on the verge of a big break, right? She essentially enlisted the help of Veracity to investigate someone who she suspected was a bot. And, you know, as these mysteries go, as Claudia gets closer to the truth, like, this was like kind of the cornerstone, like the turning point of her investigation. Once she was putting her on the right track, she inadvertently puts herself in danger, right? Because this is when she gets, like, first she gets fired, and then, like, A, she gets fired, and B, she
No, she doesn't get fired first. She is investigating the case, and then her bike has an accident. Then she's like, oh shit, I should probably come clean to my boss because I'm way in over my head. I almost got hurt.
Okay, I thought the accident came first.
It was foul play.
Okay. So I got the
yeah, you got it mixed
wrong.
up.
But yeah, like she gets attacked and then she gets fired. So she's like, oh, now I'm definitely on the right track, right? And these are all things meant to dissuade her, but in fact, just makes her even more committed to solving this mystery.
For a while, she's just like, I can't believe Komla would fire me. I thought he was really into the motive, the why of the death of Sarah. Like, why would he put the phone into the drawer and not immediately call the police? I feel like he's also investigating. And I'm like, I love how she just kind of gaslit herself into thinking, oh yeah, he's in on it too. And it turns out he was in on it. So her instincts were correct.
I was surprised that the parlor room scene happened in the beginning of the third act. Like, it happened a lot earlier than I thought it would in the book. Interesting ways that Jane plays with the form or the cadence of a mystery novel, where they discover the truth, have the confrontation, and then do a gambit to get the killer to confess.
I do love how Bex is like, I think Koma might be the killer. I am like, maybe 70% sure, but I hope like 30% I'm wrong. Let's dig deeper into this.
That chapter was hilarious because Bex seeks out Claudia to go over her suspicions. And then there were multiple instances where Beck's like, oh, hey, but we need evidence for this. And Claudia goes, well, I have the evidence for that. And like Bex said,
and then she's like, how did you get that evidence? And it's like, well, I just guessed the password after numerous attempts. And then, you know, with getting Sarah's phone, for example, she broke into Sarah's house.
Claudia did a lot of crimes during her investigation, which is why, like...
Yeah. And Bex is just like, why would you do that? That is so stupid. But we have the thing that we need, so I guess we'll use it. I really love Bex. I think Bex was my favorite character, even though I related to Claudia a lot. But Bex was so funny. I loved how there's a scene where she shows up at Claudia's apartment and Max is there, her gay roommate who is an art student. And she's like, your art is so good. Why have you not been pitching to galleries? You millennials, you think you can just get things after like 10 rejections? No, you have to work harder. And then she, you know, she's like complaining and stuff, but she gives him all of the
Yeah.
contacts. And I'm like, she cares.
This
She
is how
cares.
you know Jane Peck grew up in Asia on a steady diet of anime, because Bex is classic tsundere character tropes, right?
Yeah. But I love Bex. She was like so sassy and snarky, and I love it. And yeah, you get the backstory of Komla. He kind of teased it out in the beginning, being like, oh yeah, I used to work at one of the earliest dating apps, and
Soulmate,
it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And-
then he's like, and then in the parlor scene that we were talking about, they're like, hey, we know you're involved in this. What the hell is going on? And he's like, well, listen to my story. And then
Yeah. It does play with the mystery genre where it's not exactly a crime of passion, but passion is involved. He enabled this to happen because he is still in love with his ex, who was his co-founder, who pushed him out of his own company when they disagreed with like how to use the data they were collecting, right?
Yeah, I think they're both in the wrong because I'm very firmly like anti-AI. He has a very optimistic view of AI. He's like, oh yeah, AI can steer people to make a better version of themselves, make better decisions.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, well, the ethics of that is very gray.
Yeah.
And then you have Lucinda, who is just like, well, we can use that for business as long as it furthers my research into building more capable AIs, then the ends justifies the means.
Yeah, I think she believes the same thing. She believes in the power of AI to improve people's lives. But she's also like, I need more money to get to that point, and I'm willing to sell to the devil to make that happen. That's where the disagreement came. They're arguing about getting funding from a company that will obviously use this data for nefarious purposes.
Yeah. And the reason why they came up with the synth in the first place is like, okay, people want to find true love, but people are going to lie on the internet, right? How do we root out the liars? I guess that comes from good intentions, but also you are coming up with AI profiles pretending to be human beings and, you know, wasting people's time on these apps thinking that they're actually making a meaningful connection with someone.
Yeah.
And then they ghost them. That's a tactic to keep them on the app and continue to spend money. It's a tactic we've seen in actual dating apps and other services. I remember I saw a documentary about like, it was like for an IVF company, and you get to pick who your sperm donor is going to be based on their profile. And a lot of those profiles were fake. There was a huge case on it. And I'm like, yeah, it happens. Whether it's AI or just like faking it manually.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
I think it's just the cost of living in like a capitalistic society where like even the best of intentions will eventually get capitalized or get monetized and will get its soul sucked out of it, right? Like social media began as a way to keep in touch with your friends and let your family members know what's going on in your life, share pictures. And now it's become a way to push doctrines,
right-wing agenda,
yeah,
misinformation.
Yeah.
Or to grift on a scam somehow. Yeah.
And in the next scene, right after the parlor room scene, we have like
the heist.
The operation. Yeah, the heist to
Yeah.
elicit a confession. We meet the big bad capitalist guy who's really interested in using the AI to do capitalism. I think we're probably setting him up as the big bad in the next book because that's definitely where this story is going. But the murderer turns out to be Lucinda, who is Kamala's ex, romantic and business partner, and they decide to confront her at this charity gala that she's being honored at for her work in like mentoring young entrepreneurs of marginalized
young
communities.
entrepreneurs in marginalized communities. Yeah, it's one of those galas.
Yeah, and this also comes with a scene where Claudia has to ask her sister for the hookup to get into the gala, and her sister's like, "What? You're asking me for something for the first time?" This
is like right after their fight too. They had a really nasty fight where Coraline was like, "You're the mom's favorite. You don't know how lucky you are." And when I was in Taiwan, like I had no idea my mom was my mom and we were ripped away from our grandparents. Everything I do is not good enough for her. She's always paid more attention to you. I'm like, wow, this is some like therapy stuff that you have to work through.
Yeah.
Clearly she has anxiety disorder and stuff because they mention it and she has PTSD, but it's like, yeah.
Well, she also
that's
has
something
her
that
own,
you should
like,
not.
relationship problems, right? Because we didn't
we'll
talk
talk
her,
about
right?
Lionel
Yeah.
after this. Well, yeah, we'll talk about him. I have a lot of things to say about him, but it's just like they had Coraline and Claudia had that big fight, and even after that, Coraline was like, "Yeah, I have your back. Like, I have no idea who you want to bring to the gala, but you're my sister, so yeah, let's do it."
She's probably just glad that she's asking for something for the first time, right? You know, nepotism, not the best thing, but also there's something good about feeling like you're hooking up your family with something
Needed.
that you work on, right?
I think Coraline was also very excited to do a makeover session of her sister, and I totally understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, because she's been characterized as someone who's just very, very slow. She's like she's a Columbo type of investigator. Like, not really like keeping up with appearances, look kind of shabby, but like, you know.
Coraline being like, we had a fight, but it's okay. I'm going to do a makeover. I'm going to make sure that you are the best version of yourself. It's going to be so much fun. And I'm like, wow, what a sisterly thing to do.
What did you think about the final heist, the confession heist? I think the whole point was to position themselves in a way to get Kamala to talk to Lucinda, right? And ask her straight up, like, did you do it?
Yeah. It's such a wild story, and all of the evidence is probably gone by now because Lucinda is a very capable person. The only way we can get evidence is her actually admitting it. So Kamala's like, it's someone that I love, and I was kind of the reason why she ended up like this, so I'm going to have this confrontation.
Yeah.
But also, like, he could have done it by himself. This is mentioned later in the book. Bex is like, why do you think he asked us to be there? And Claudia's like, oh, maybe it's like Odysseus and the Sirens. He needed his crew there to like tie him up to the mast so that he could like go through with the mission he placed on himself. And it's like, yeah, because
I mean, Kamala himself, like, an idealist for sure, but also kind of a coward. Like, he let himself be pushed out of his own company. He's
willing to hide evidence to like save Lucinda in the beginning. Yeah.
He tipped Lucinda off about Sarah's article, knowing full well what Lucinda might do to protect her interests, right? And so, like, he's not exactly the bravest person. So I can see why he needed to be tied to the mast in order to follow through with his gambit. And, the deal was that, like, yeah, I'll do this for you, but this is a personal issue, not an issue with AI.
And I'm like, I beg to differ, sir, but okay,
which
whatever.
Is like 101 in the playbook of a lot of big tech. Whenever they get caught up in like a privacy scandal, it's always like, oh, it's the fault of one person. It's not a fault of technology, right? It's like, it's not like guns don't kill people kill people type of argument. It's frustrating. But also, this is how they operate. This is how they get away with a lot of things.
Yeah. Speaking of Kamala and Lucinda, we have a lot of relationships in this book. Obviously, because dating agency, but also like Charles has a girlfriend, Jessie, who, is kind of like, she hasn't been fully accepted into the family and is like, I know this family is very dysfunctional, but I'm trying my best here. And you have Lionel and Coraline. And then you have Jude and his wife, and Sarah and the journalism professor she was having an affair with. She took a leave of absence so they could be in a relationship without him having to resign. It's like, wow, these are people who love their partners, but there's some really complicated shit happening. There's a lot of baggage, and it just shows that human mess is very inconsistent when it comes to love. And that's the whole reason why, like, the AI stuff it is put in this system of matching people, because it's just like, how do you match people who lie all the time to themselves and don't know what they want and are making mistakes left and right?
But then you get AI trained on those inconsistencies, and then it's like that one AI that turned into a Nazi, right? That was like was a couple years ago. Yeah. I guess before we end our discussion, I do want to go back to Cora and her relationship with Lionel, which, like, it was so hilarious to have like an art friend situation in the middle of this book. Like, bad art friend.
Yellow face.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so Lionel is described to be like a very handsome white guy who is kind of oblivious to his pretty privilege and also his white boy privilege. He's a writer who tries to get into the very artsy literary magazines like the New Yorker. And yeah, and like it on paper, he would be so not a match for Coraline. And the funny thing is, like, they did meet through a dating app, but it was a mistake. Like, Coraline thought he was somebody else. And he's like, oh my God, thank God, because I was wondering why someone as hot as you would pick someone like me who is a writer and not a finance bro. Their relationship is described to be pretty good. He is described as a very good partner, caring. He listens to Coraline's complaints about her family. He like rubs her feet. He like cooks. And it's like, oh, this sounds like a very considerate partner, until you find out that he has used Coraline's childhood trauma as his inspiration. And not even inspiration at this point. It's just copy and paste into like a short story. And I was like, that's hilarious, but also very sad.
Yeah. I wasn't sure where the story was going until like...
Oh, that's funny. I knew exactly where it was going, but yeah.
But we did get a really good confrontation scene at the book signing where Claudia, again, using her amateur sleuth prowess, gets a confession, not from Lionel himself, but from his friend who was praising him for his latest work. Is it about the immigrant daughter who's like in a dysfunctional family? And she's like, oh, did you read it? Busted.
And I just love none of them questioned how this white dude is writing a story about a Taiwanese immigrant family. Like, it's just like no one thought it was strange. They're like, oh man, it's a story filled with drama and angst and it's so relatable, but he's a white dude and this is not his experience. And then it brings to question appropriation, because you can write a story outside of your experience, but obviously there's the balance of being like, okay, am I the right person to tell this story? What am I trying to do with telling the story? For him, it's like, I just want to get published into America's collection of best short stories. And it's like, really? You sold out your relationship for that?
And like the tiniest of credit for him for feeling guilty about it, I guess. But at the same time, that's not enough. That's pretty messed up, dude.
Yeah, this is where it's like, I love Coraline. I think she's like, a beautifully complex person. And it's like, yeah, but you don't do that to the people that you love.
Yeah, he loves her, but not enough to kill the story for her sake, right? Like, he's not willing to put her feelings and well-being above his professional goals.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that the zine that he applied for was Zinc Cabin, because that is like a reference to Tin House, which is like an actual literary house that people publish to get into bigger publications. It's a very prestigious publisher.
That makes sense.
And I do love I do love how Claudia, as an English major, she knows that some of these literary fiction authors are full of BS. She's like, oh my God, books where nothing happens. It's beautifully written, but nothing freaking happens. It's just character portrayal or just, I don't know. It's good writing, but also not my jam. It's just so funny how that one author friend is like, well, not everything is about plot when it comes to writing. And I'm like, oh, what kind of writer are you? I would not like to read your book, because I too, like Claudia, like to have more than just character portrayal in my books. Not everything has to be a freaking metaphor.
I don't mind those, like in film form, for instance, right? Like an indie film that's more character study. Like, I don't mind.
Yeah, because that's 2 hours of your time and not 8 or 9 hours of reading.
All right. I guess to wrap up our discussion, at the end of the book, Kamo decides to leave Veracity, and he leaves his ownership share to the 3 remaining employees, Claudia, Bex, and Squirrel, who is like their hacker friend, or like their IT guy, right? He's just a hacker, right? And what did you think about this? It kind of made us feel like this is an origin story of like this mystery series, right?
Yeah, they're still a detective agency. Wonder if it's just going to focus on dating stuff or if they're going to broaden their caseload into things outside of dating, well, like online dating.
Well, I mean, at the end of the book, they do tease like another murder, right? Basically, Charles's project lead was found dead. Not exactly a murder yet, but definitely like someone involved in this project that we now know has a lot to do with the synths, like the synthetic.
Yeah, he was Lucinda's VP.
Yeah. And so that kind of becomes a quasi cliffhanger, right? Because this becomes the next case. Or because we do find out that Veracity is already on the case, right? Because we get a really, really funny exchange at the end where, again, maybe not sexual tension, but definitely Jane knows what she's doing, right? Because when Claudia tells Beck that she found out something about the death of the VP, Beck says, well, we're already on it. We just didn't want to ruin your holiday. Don't do anything stupid or else I will kiss you. She's like, no, kill you.
Or kill you. Kill you. Yeah, damn it. I mean, we kind of glossed over it, but I will mention, I do like how by exploring Claudia's relationship with her siblings, she's able to understand Sarah and Iris's weird relationship with each other, their weird resentment / love for each other, because what ends up happening is Sarah has this apartment in Manhattan. It's really valuable in real estate. Iris has been paying for it, and it's just like she thinks that Iris is the killer, and that turns out to be another red herring. But she's like, oh, okay, like they're sisters who had a parent who favored one child over the other, and you spend your entire life trying to compensate for that, and you don't even get it after they die because they give the inheritance to the favored child and nothing for the unfavored child. I do like how it's not just like, oh, let's talk about Claudia's family. It's like actually tied into the case. So I thought that was nicely done.
Yeah.
But also, I'm like, Claudia, what the fuck are you doing going into Iris's office without without backup?
I think it was a really cool way to use the mystery to also explore Claudia's own immigrant family issues. And I look forward to reading more of that in the second book. Hopefully we'll get Jane on the podcast sometime soon to talk about it. But overall, I really enjoyed this book as a murder mystery, but also as an interrogation to our relationship with not just dating apps, but with data, right? Like it really puts in plain language what you are giving up when you sign up for things.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like how not only does Jane play with detective tropes and literary references here and there, but you have Claudia who is using the stereotype of, I'm a small Asian lady who weighs 100 pounds and I'm so shy and soft-spoken to escape sticky situations. I'm like, yeah, that would not work if you were a black person or a brown person. She is using every single tool in her arsenal.
She was born for this, right? She was trained for this. Her literary education, her stature. She is built to be as inconspicuous and invisible as possible, which I guess is another metaphor for like the Asian American experience, I guess. Yeah.
Also, I do want to mention, like, I know it was like a big scene where she's coming out to her mom, but she kind of chickens out at the end. The mom's like, you can have 2 of the 3 options: nice, Chinese, boy. And she's like, okay, so I can have nice and Chinese, and it doesn't have to be a boy. Okay, so like mom knows that I'm gay, but we're not going to say anything. I'm like, wow, what an Asian way to come out to your parents.
I mean, I did like the fact that the Asian parent trauma is not resolved. It's just kind of like, what's the word? Satiated. It's, it's
giving up with age.
It's not like it's they're halfway there. They're not there yet, but the possibility for a full reconciliation is open. Her mom is pretty relatable. She is mean to her kids, but feels bad about it later, but can't express it in like an open way. And so she shows in other ways, which is then also misconstrued and misinterpreted. So it's kind of, looking forward to how those dynamics develop in the next book.
Yeah. I have a common saying when it comes to like abusive parents. And it's once you become a parent, you're no longer the victim. So like it's like, yeah, you went through a lot of shit and it was hard in your life, but now you are a parent and you should not be lashing out on your children and trying to pass on, you know, like be mean to them.
Yeah.
Like I know you can't help it sometimes, but it emphasizes the point of you need to start healing yourself ideally before you have children, because you don't want to damage like your children's psyche with your baggage. So I'm not a parent, but I know therapy is kind of a taboo thing with the older Asian generation, but I'm like, you need to.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't just have this like, oh, I'm going to verbally abuse my children. And sometimes like they mentioned like that, like she slapped Charles when he was young and then felt bad, cooked his favorite meals, but that's not reconciliation. It's just, you know, burying things. And it's like, I understand that is like cultural, but it's still not okay. It's one way to deal with trauma, but I think it's important to call out neglect and abusive behavior while, you know, having empathy and being like, I know why you turned out like this, but it's still not okay that you hurt me like this.
Yeah.
As someone from a dysfunctional family who has had to go through like similar things.
Unfortunately, the one thing, especially elder parents, hate hearing more than any other is that they messed up and did things wrong. It's a tough conversation. Interested to see how that develops in the next book, because nothing is really resolved, right? Relationships have progressed, but they're definitely not where they need to be for a healthy family relationship, which I don't know if is even possible at this point. Maybe they just need to figure out how to get by. But yeah, I guess with that, that'll do it for our discussion of The Verifiers by Jane Peck. And again, if you read along with us and are interested to see what happens next, the next book in the series, The Rivals, is out at bookstores everywhere now too. So definitely check that out. As always, if you have any thoughts about our discussion or about the book in general, please let us know either on Goodreads or on Discord if you're a Patreon supporter. We always love to hear your feedback on our discussions whenever possible. All right. Before we go, Rira, can you let us know what our book club pick is for the month of March?
So for March, we will be reading The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, and it is a historical fiction book set in 1953 Tehran, Iran, during the political upheaval, years after a failed first love relationship. You have two characters who like meet again, and it's like, well, can they get back together again, and will they be able to work things out this time around? So it's kind of like a second chance romance. I am glad that we are going back to West Asia in our catalog of book club picks. It is definitely a change of setting, because I feel like we have been in East Asian contemporary land for a while.
Yeah.
Switching up is good.
Yeah. Definitely looking forward to getting into this book. I will be posting our reading schedule onto Patreon and Discord for those of you following us there. And as always, if you already read this book and have some thoughts to share, please let us know on Goodreads or on Discord so that we can include your feedback on our book club discussion episodes. But yeah, with that, thank you so much for joining us for our discussion of The Verifiers by Jane Peck. We'll see you all next time on Books and Boba. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey, I'm Phil Yu, and you may know me from a blog called Angry Asian Man.
And I'm Jeff Yang, author, journalist, and celebrity dad.
We host a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, an unfiltered conversation about what's happening in Asian America.
Each week or so, we host a discussion about some of the most vital and interesting topics in our pop culture and our community, bringing in guests who are shaping and informing this thing called Asian America from Hollywood to DC and beyond.
We got media, entertainment, food, family, politics, representation.
The good, the bad, the WTF of it all.
So check us out wherever you get your podcasts or at theycallsbruce.com.
Peace.
Peace.